With that, perhaps we can move to the next part of this session, and that would be the panel discussion. So let me start first with Ms. Makiko. And I mean, you already presented some of the kind of elements of an active or effective labor market policy. But if you could give us a bit of a summary of what would be the key elements of an active labor market policy which would generate jobs and would promote employability, and especially in the context of LDC graduation here, but also in the context of the post-COVID situation, because we have learned a lot from our COVID experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mentioned some generality. In terms of employment generation, active labor market policies as a tool to generate employment, well, at least two issues. One is the use of public works program, which is of course the most traditional instrument that the ILO also has been involved in for many, many years. But of course, it's the kind of shortness, or how do you say, it's very temporary kind of employment engagement. And once the program is out, people seem to just, they still may need other kind of support. Otherwise, they cannot either run their own businesses much better or anything like this. So there are some of the issues related to public works program, which particularly in a country, but I think Cambodia has had experience with public works program, if your institutional memory is there. So, I mean, this is an area that can be explored, but it also needs some time to, how do you say, set up the mechanism or the practice. The other is related to employment subsidies, which doesn't necessarily create job. Well, it can incentivize job, but of course, use of subsidies is always pro and a con, and it has to be used with some level of caution. And the graph I showed where many countries responded with employment subsidies during COVID time was, of course, because the main objective was job retention. It was quite urgent, and I think many governments, they were determined that it's very important that people stay on the job as much as they can. So that, but in normal times, or if you're thinking ahead in terms of, you know, LDC wanting to reach some level of structural change and upgrading, for example, I think this needs to be actually carefully studied and maybe discussed, at least involving, of course, also the private sector, the workers, and of course the government. So these are the two key instruments. I'm sorry, I forgot the other one. Entrepreneurship. But as far as I know, at the moment, the Ministry of Labor itself does not actively carry out enterprise development program. I think it's a responsibility of, I think, another part of the government, which is fine. But if you want to integrate, that could also then create some level of coordination challenge. But yes, I mean, I think it can be overcome if it's, how do you say, tackled as such. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Makiko, on that. I think maybe perhaps in the question and answer session, maybe one can also ask a question about the relevance of all these three instruments to the context of Cambodia, especially given that, you know, with LDC graduation, there would be a lot of emphasis on productivity. So perhaps that could be discussed later on. But thanks to that. Maybe let me then go to the next panelist, Mr. Siriot. And if you can tell us about how can the labor market institutions in Cambodia adapt to the emerging global challenges, especially in the context of, you know, the Industrial Revolution 4.0, also, you know, the future of work, the automation, and also in the context of the evolving skills demand in the market. Thank you.
Actually, for how labor market institution in Cambodia adapted to the emerging global challenge, I think the first thing would be conducting the labor market research, like how often, like more often, and basically we had to conduct it for example, in this case, we conduct it semesterly so that we can explore more options, like in terms of the policy flexibility. And also another one would be the skill upgrading and reskilling program. And one of the current implementation of the reskilling and upskilling program would be the 1.5M policy, like a program where we try to provide training for the existing workforce and our existing labor force, where we try to provide the training incentive, where if you come to get the training, we have flexible timing. We also have the incentive for you to come, and then we give you some benefit. Basically, of course, the monetary benefit, but more than that, it's the flexible timing where they can still work but they also can still upgrade their skill. And another one would be, I think I already mentioned, but probably the promotion of general education in terms of on the STEM education. So because in the evolving need of the current technology, so STEM education would be important because it provides you more understanding on the basics of, if not basic, would be you could able to adapt to the new change. And also another one would be the campaign awareness, where we can focus on the digital literacy campaign so that we could provide some basic of how to use some of the technology so that they could further their study on the use of the technology. I think.
Thank you, Ben. Especially, I think the point on the market research is quite important, because that is where you can see what are the needs, and what are the what should be done. On the training incentives, on the stipends, I think there are a lot of work done. Sometimes it also produces a kind of perverse incentive. Sometimes people just come to training just to get the stipends, but I think overall it also creates good incentives to attract. But I think the issue of flexibility is also quite important. Now let me turn to Dr. Abla. So Dr. Abla, one of the roles of the government is also, as I said earlier, is to kind of address the issues of market failures. And sometimes the market failures occurs in terms of the policy is not benefiting everyone, especially people who are more vulnerable. So my question to you is that how can the ALMPs be designed in a way so that they can address the specific challenges faced by vulnerable groups such as youth, women, and workers, including in the informal sector?
Yeah, thanks, thank you. So I think the beginning of my answer is to say that it is good for ALMPs to be designed really thinking about these groups, which is not always the case, right? Sometimes you have sort of some blanket ALMP, let's do some typically wage subsidies, but not well thought out and targeted. And for this good thinking, I will also repeat what Serevut said, in that the research, right? The data research to understand the constraints of each group and then tailor the policies to them is very important. Now, if we think specifically about each of these groups, and here I will let's assume a dynamic labor market like Cambodia, right? So it's not so much a concern on the demand side, and there has been a lot of job creation, including in the formal sector. But let's assume that some groups are struggling a bit more to get to these jobs, right? So with youth, I think some constraints that are specific to youth are lack of experience, right? That's they're young, they haven't done much. So typically the internships and apprenticeships are a way, subsidized, are a way for them to increase their productivity while acquiring that experience, right? And that's why that is so important for youth, and Cambodia has that, and that's good. But then the thing is, it partly also comes with a lack of experience. One challenge of youth is also to signal their skills, right? Because employers typically, they don't have a CV to show, right? Actually, I'm good at my job, or I know what I'm doing because I have 15 years of experience to show that. And this is where I think I'll probably repeat a lot of what Makiko and Serevut said, but this is where the role of public employment services, in the case of Cambodia, the national employment agencies, this is where they play an important role. And I would say also in developing more skills testing, and beyond sort of just this is my diploma from this training, right? Sometimes employers want to know more skills on behavior, these behavioral skills. And so finding ways to allow the youth to signal their skills. There is research recent that shows that can encourage employers to hire them, because then part of that information asymmetry, which is a market failure, is addressed, right? A last one for youth is again related to behavior. Hyperbolic preferences, a lot of impatience, maybe they start on a job and they don't really wait to see if they're actually good at it, if they like it. They start, it's not super exciting, they leave, right? Or they don't always know how to behave on the job, right? And so all these dimensions I would also emphasize as important to address, and the same, I think, in the program for the 1.5 million youth, these are, there is also training on behavioral skills, but I think that there is need for more of that, more systematically also across all training programs. For women, I think number of constraints, I'm not sure are directly related to active labor market programs, but then I think it's important to have a holistic approach, and this is where the coordination can be important, because challenges can be more around childcare, challenges can be around occupational segregation, right? Some jobs are perceived as being only for men, some jobs only for women, and I will also repeat Serevut, so typically women also understudy in STEM, right? And if you have jobs that are increasing in STEM, including, with IR 4.0, then women will be excluded from these jobs. So it's important to start early, even in the education system. In the informal sector, I think there, it also depends, right? If it's about micro businesses, some people are informal and they have a micro business, they actually want to keep it, but it may make sense to support improvements in productivity in those businesses, right? But that's different from informal workers who may want to transition to formal jobs. And then I think, again, it's a mix of counseling, information. They need to know about these jobs, where are they, how much do they pay, and what do they need, and then some skills training to support them. Across, and I will be done soon, I think, what is important is the demand, when it comes to a specific sort of skills training, but even the counseling is always keeping very close eye on demand, and also let the private sector, certainly define the needs and actually bring in more private sector provision, definition of training, because no one better than employers knows what they want. And sorry, let me just check, because on this cross-cutting, the other point is on the cross-cutting, needing multiple interventions. In that, I will repeat what Makiko said. Often, people face multiple constraints, and I think one of the reasons why maybe sometimes, previous meta-analysis of ALMPs showed limited results is because a number of programs address just one constraint, and then that's not enough. Right? And so you may need to do both the counseling, the apprenticeship, the behavioral intervention. And in previous programs that I supervised for the World Bank, we did that. And because these programs seem to be more promising. So address multiple constraints at once. It's a bigger investment, but it's also probably bigger return.
Thank you very much, and I think that is a good segue to the next question, and that is how to promote public-private partnership in enhancing the effectiveness of LMP in Cambodia, and that question I will ask Mr. Suk Lur. And in a way, I think that would also address the issue of what we call the coordination failure and the information asymmetry. So perhaps the question is that while the public policy is there, the government does things, but how that is communicated to the private sector, and how the private sector is engaged so that all those policies are implemented in an effective manner. But and maybe at the same time, how can the public sector get a feedback from the private sector so that the public policy is informed by the feedback from the private sector as well? Thank you.
Thank you so much. It sounds like this is the most difficult questions for the panel. It's all just for me. I think maybe first, CAMFIBA, we are the Federation of Employers and Business Association here, and we have 2,500 both direct and indirect members, enterprises, factories, and so forth. And we are covering about 1.1 million workforce, in terms of those being employed by our members. In relation to the questions, I think that, so from our perspective, I think that the first question is what is partnership, right? And partnership meaning that you have to have a partner. To us, the private sector, the employer association, we see that there has been not just good but great collaborations, with between the government, private sector, and other actors in solving these pressing issues of job creation, skill gap, skill mismatch, employment information services, etc. And all in the hope of one thing, of course, speaking as a Cambodian, is how to improve the country's economy, reducing poverty, promoting the standard of living of the Cambodian people, in this kind of like a fast evolving global challenges. So these are, I think that this is where we see, and I think that the question is, what is the characteristic, the attitude of Cambodian government toward engagement of the private sector? And our answer is that we have been satisfied. We are pleased to see that, and as a Cambodian, I can say that employers see this as not something as a given, but like purposeful engagement of the government to try to solve some of this big problem for Cambodia and Cambodian people. Now, getting to the next question is what have we done, as a CAMFIBA and as a private sector in general? I think that the government is open for us to participate, not just to match job information, but even in the early process of job creation. As a small country, we are aware, and private sector is aware that there is a pressing need, a critical challenge to attract investor, make investment, create new jobs, but who and how? So we don't only rely on domestic investors. Government is very aggressive, actually, in terms of attracting foreign investment into the country, inviting new industry into the country. And in this process, members of CAMFIBA, as well as the private sector in general, partner up with the government to go on investment promotion activities outside, so like roadshow, to try to bring in new investment. And this is how we can talk all day about skill mismatch, about providing job information. But if jobs are not created in the first place, then it's a problem. So this is, I think, the area that we have been collaborating with the government. We collaborate very well on the Skill Development Fund, and I think that our member association, TAFTAC in particular, CGTI, is also collaborating on that on the government Skill Development Fund to provide training opportunities, and we appreciate that. Now, maybe if I can touch the last part. The view on the proper institution and mechanisms for the private sector to, one, participate, and to provide feedback on what we exactly need in terms of, skills, skill demands, right? What have our experience been in terms of recruitment, etc. And I think that there are lots of forums, and some of them are very innovative. Government-private sector forum as the kind of like the main umbrella between the government and the private sector to solve these critical priorities. But underneath that, there are mechanisms that CAMFIBA partner up with the Cambodian government, both in particular the Ministry of Labor and Vocational Training, as well as Ministry of Economy and Finance, through, for example, National Training Board, Skill Sector Council, a Skill Development Fund, a National Social Security Fund Board, as well as a mechanism on, orienting the social protections policy in Cambodia. What should it be? Should it go fast? And how fast should it be? Or should it be moderated in order to reflect the actual job and investment environment in the country? So if I can put into just one last word, it's this. I think that the partnership has been great. We appreciate the attitude, the characteristic of being very open of the Cambodian government to engage us, employers association and the private sector in solving these public issues.
Thank you, and I think you would be one of the few private sectors who seems to be happy with the government, and I'm very happy to hear that. With that, maybe we will now go into the second round of questions. We will go in the same order. So maybe I start with you, Makiko. And the question is, what lessons Cambodia can learn from other countries, especially in designing and implementing LMPs to achieve more inclusive and sustainable employment?
Okay, thank you for the question. First, just to mention, much of the evaluation of LMPs, huge body of literature is actually mainly in Europe and the Americas, and some in Africa. Asia is relatively still, that body of, not literature, but it's an exercise, that assessment exercise compared to some other continents seem to be still relatively limited as of now. So learning from the neighbors, I'm sure there are some elements, but I'm sorry, I can't think one off the top of my head. But that's one. So the information base is a little bit limited. So I just go a little bit in a general sense, because this is something that even more than 10 years ago, I was reading again about ALMP, and they always said public employment services is actually a very cost-effective way of providing, helping people, particularly young people, into the labor market or letting them stay there. And I think you have mentioned the important element of combining it with some kind of counseling and maybe a period of training. So that kind of packaging, if it can be done, but if training becomes too expensive, at least some level of counseling about what are your rights, what are your actually obligations or commitments if you go and work with some kind of wage contract, for example. So that's one. The other is that I think, it was in the ILO report that there is a need for continued investment in this kind of institutions and programs. You can't, exactly, that's what I was trying to say, that you can't suddenly have an enterprise development program as a component of active labor market policy. So there is a need for continued investment, and I think as of this moment, this kind of continued investment in higher income countries, particularly in Europe, of course, they pay off in downturns because they are very well instituted, prepared. They know what packages exist, how they do it. Whereas in developing countries, and I think these are mostly Latin American countries, in good times it pays off. So perhaps it's because they're also strengthening the institutions. But if it pays off, maybe in good times is perhaps the time when that kind of institutional investment should go in, if it can pay off in bad times eventually. So anyway, some level of commitment and long-term investment would be important. It's not that you can achieve some beautiful program next year, but it's just, and which I think the ministry, is doing. So it's more continuation and perhaps, continue thinking along that line.
Thank you. And maybe on the last point, I think the government has quite a few programs, especially the NSF, right? Where they also kind of try to incentivize and create those kind of enabling environment. My next question is to you, Dr. Sirioth, and that is about what are the kind of potential challenges that you see in aligning the LMPs with the national development strategies, especially in the context of Cambodia's LDC graduation roadmap, and how can those be addressed?
I think regarding this question, basically the development goal on a country level would be not flexible as the active labor market policy, because the word active is already in there. So the labor market dynamic is changing like every 6 months or 3 months, because the scale demand, it could be either horizontal or vertical. So the alignment between the flexible active labor market policy with the development goal would be time consuming, and also in terms of resource also constraint, both the technical and also both the financings. And another one would be data-driven decision making, because Cambodia in terms of data, we're still lacking. Even though we try to build the data, for example, even the Cambodia Socio-Economic Survey, it's every 2 years, and labor force survey would be every 10 years. And we try to bridge that gap, like try to build more like annually data so that we can conduct a more comprehensive like policy in terms of like data-driven policy. And to address the challenge would be so we have to develop or integrate the policy framework to ensure that the LMP are explicitly linked to the national strategy, so that when we have the drafting the LDC graduation roadmap, we have to include the active labor market policy within the roadmap, so that we can align the workforce to go along with the new the new strategy when we graduate. And last but not least, I think would be capacity building. So because on the government side, even though we try, for example, even if we have the finance, we still need some capacity to improve, like to conduct the research, even though we have, right now we do conduct semesterly, but it's still hard to maintain. So we have to increase the capacity so that we can maintain the labor market research more often and more regular, so that we can update the policy with this regard. And I think another one would be the regional cooperation and integration, because due to the changing in terms of the labor economic landscape is actually not just the change within the country, but also the influence from the outside world. And there would be the influence of trade that could result in the restructuring or reshoring the product, and that would be affecting the labor market landscape. So that is also one of the key components that we should consider, and we should address it in formulating the policy. And I think for my point, that should be.
Thank you very much. No, that's very comprehensive. I think just on the point on integrating, the labor market priorities as well as policy for jobs creation in the LDC graduation or the transition strategy, I think that is quite important. Because one of the findings that we see in our analysis is that while the Cambodia would lose some of the exemptions on tariffs, in a way it's going to increase the cost, right? The overall cost is going to go up. And one of the ways to kind of address that issue is to improve productivity and to reduce cost, which means that per unit cost is reduced, and that can happen when you have higher labor productivity, and which would come from training and other interventions. My next question is to Dr. Abla, and Dr. Abla is, there are different institutions involved in the labor market. So the question is that what role should labor market institution play, especially in fostering a balance between job creation, job quality, and labor markets? Not an easy thing to do, right?
Yeah, not an easy thing to do, and not an easy question for me, I have to say. So, yeah, it is my question, but it's not an easy one for me. So, yeah. I mean, I think the point that you just made is very important, right? When it comes to actually this balance, it's a lot about productivity versus cost, right? And so I think the approach, and I believe this is the approach in Cambodia, it seems, for the minimum wage, right? And we have the Council on Minimum Wage here, is the sort of I don't know how to call it, but sort of realistic idealism, right? Because the risk, if we decompose these job creation, job quality, and labor rights, the risk is if you are too idealistic and you put the bar too high, sure, it may be great for the few workers who will still make it at that cost, but the risk is informality for all the others, right? So, I mean, both destruction of formal jobs, right, which can also ultimately affect the quality of jobs for everyone, right? So typically, again, that's why, and there again, I will repeat what Serevut said, this is where data is very important, right? Good, granular, recent data on productivity changes to then help set, again, for a key labor market institution. In Cambodia, it's only for the textile sector, but it's very important, and I would advise other sectors to do the same. It's, okay, what is a level that does offer, a reasonable floor, right, to the workers, but is not going to be too high and then actually exclude a lot of workers and possibly lead to investors going elsewhere, right? Because the labor costs are going to be too high. I think, and again, to be honest, this is not, it's not my sort of area of expertise, but I think one important thing to think about moving forward across the world is the complementarity between labor market institutions and social protection, right? There's always that debate of protecting jobs or protecting workers. I mean, ultimately what is important is to protect individuals and workers. And you know, even for high-income countries, right, with the changing nature of work, more gig workers, platform workers, you know, I think that this is what Danny Roderick says, but I need to catch up more with what he says. The social protection and labor policies, they really need to be thought of even more, even more together, right? One point that I wanted to mention just on job quality is job quality is also about flexible work arrangements, right? And of course, this is the same. This is where data is important, you know, but a number of workers who either run their own micro business or platform workers, one needs to be very careful, but a number of them do value a lot the flexibility, right? And we have done discrete choice experiments in Malaysia, giving people choice between, you know, less flexible, more money, you know, and a number of people do prefer having more flexibility, right? So I just want to mention this as another sort of dimension with the changing nature of work as we think of labor market institutions.
Thank you. And just on the flexibility, it can be defined in different ways. And one of the flexibilities could be work from home and, you know, these kind of things. And you would have seen in the news that the Elon Musk, the advisor to the coming president of the US, is going to review the work from home modality, which is currently used by the US government. And I think they're going to be more strict around that because they think that there is a loss of $2 trillion on that. So it's quite an interesting time ahead of us. My last question is to Mr. Suklur. And you know, one of the reasons that we have kept the privates or the federation at the end of the questions is so that you can listen to everyone and then you can also reflect on those. So it's intentional, yeah? So it's not that we just put it on, put you on the last panelist. And the question is, in what ways can public-private partnership enhance the effectiveness of the active labor market policies in Cambodia? That is the last question is on the social dialogue, sorry. So what role do social dialogue and tripartite cooperation play in shaping labor market institutions and ensuring the success of LMPs? Thank you.
Thank you. I think if we can flip the question, I want to take these questions, I want to flip it a bit and then also take the opportunity to sort of, look back, the development of Cambodia over the last 20 years, contrast that, with today. And the question would be, right, without social dialogue, private sector or employers having no role in in participation of the policy making of the government, especially in the area of labor market policy, industrial relations, labor law, and regulation. What would it be like in an environment like that? And I say this because in some country, the role of employer is very limited. And that's why I say that, it should not be taken as something that is, naturally granted, that this is what private sector or employers would have. And therefore, let's just take it easy. This is the commitment of the Cambodian government that after the war, Cambodia ratified a lot of conventions in order to ILO convention in order to gain privileged access to trade markets in Europe, in the United States, and looking at this. if we don't have this dialogue, we just don't know how to, input and inform and feedback the government on what works, what doesn't work, and what we employers need, in respect of the business investment as well as the, skills demands, for industrial development. So we see this, right now with all the commitments of the country. Now we have a social dialogue, as part of the mechanism for us to engage in all these different policy. And when I say that, the country is, from us, the private sector is the liberal, because there are lots of mechanism. Some may not be working very well, but some actually does work very, very effectively. And we and our partner, colleague, are, members of these dialogues mechanisms. National Training Board, National Minimum Wage Council, Skill Sector Council, and 8 working group on industrial relations as part of the mechanism of the government-private sector forum to resolve, issues on industrial relations, labor law, labor policies, as well as the tripartite, they call it Labor Advisory Council. So these are the mechanisms that are, in place, and most of the mechanisms are working, with us having the kind of the position, the stance, to provide our voice, our view to the government as to what, the private sector actually need, and to get the opportunity for us to thrive, as well as to solve government to solve some of the problems that the government want to solve. Now, with all these, 20 years ago, our industrial relation, I touch, since you asked, what is job? What is a job with quality, right? I think we started with low minimum wage base, right? About, I think that probably $40 many years back. But the main sector, our export sector, was also like infested with a lot of instability due to industrial strikes, right? And working conditions were not good, and capacity of the ministry, honestly, at that time, was also limited in terms of capability, in terms of resources, and many other challenges. And we, CAMFIBA, 20 years ago, maybe 20 plus, is a time that we first was established, and we saw this kind of this evolution. Fast forward, I think that just thanks to all this, again, deep engagement. What we see today is a Cambodia that has a good degree of stability in industrial relation, and and through us, CAMFIBA, labor compliance, and implementation, among our member is a priority. That means that whatever the labor law says, the member must implement. And through us, one of the active function is this kind of a labor advices that we provide, and 25,000 inquiries, over the past 2 years also. So that I think that they also have to contribute to a job with quality. One is a good job, but also with employer really complying with all these labor standards, national labor standard that we are talking about. So yes, I think that there's still a long way to go. I think as we face the country face challenges, our labor market continue to face challenges. But if you ask, I think that I would close by saying that labor compliance, right, and skill development to try to address this fast evolving industry and skill situation, and perhaps last of all, how we will continue moving forward, to protect industry as well as our workers through a properly balanced social protection and social security. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think we are just right on time. We have now 15 minutes for question and answer. May I request if you could ask very brief questions, and even if you have a comment, not more than less than 1 minute. Yeah, please raise your hand if you have any question. Or is it like everyone needs a coffee or sleeping? Okay, if there is no question, maybe, and since we have a bit of time, maybe I will ask the panelists if they have any final points to make. Maybe just, let's say, 1 minute each. Yeah? May I start from that side, from Dr. Abla?
Maybe just very, just insist on the importance of data, I think, and monitoring and evaluation, because that was one point that I forgot to mention for ALMPs in general. I think monitoring, evaluating results in order to both adjust the ALMPs in general, and also if there is more training provision, to also select and direct more trainees toward the best performing training providers. I think that that's a very important point. So that would be my last point.
Thank you, Mr. Suklur.
I thought I said so much. Now I have to add one more point. Well, maybe I think that a continued request to the government, to continue focusing on the skill development and, addressing the skill gap, plus taking the opportunity to, attract a new industry in this a current and perhaps a coming turbulence of a trade war, and it could be an opportunity for Cambodia to get a new investment and job creation.
I have about 10 points, but I won't talk 10 of them. Maybe just one on data. I think it would improve in the coming years. We are currently supporting LFS technically, but the government, I think there is a commitment. But we'll see within the coming few years. Just one, I think I didn't mention so much on productivity. Productivity and skills, I think it's important, but sometimes I think the dialogue is too linear, and I think productivity is of course affected by so many other things. Like something simple, like workplace arrangement, I happened to talk about this before, but occupational safety and health, improving health of workers, or ensuring that the micro-enterprise workplace is well kept, hygienic, etc., that can actually improve productivity and can maybe help people get better incomes. So I think some level of focus when we talk about productivity on micro-enterprises might be interesting to consider when we talk about active labor market policies. Thank you.
I think for me it would be the inclusiveness of the labor market policy, because labor market policy has to include those who are vulnerable, and especially in the upcoming of the LDC graduation, the vulnerable group would be the most affected because they are, in terms of skill, they have lack, and in terms of access and other barrier that may or may not exclude them from the development of the after we graduate from the LDC status. And that would be, we have to implement the targeted program where we have to remove those access, and that access could be provide the training where it have a more flexible schedule or time, and also other benefit that could bring them to work. For example, women with children, so that, for example, the workplace should have a childcare center and so on, that could remove those kinds of barriers. And another thing would be transportation. like for a lot of workers, like they have to travel like a very far place to work. So that could be the improvement of the transportation could also reduce the barrier to access the opportunity in the labor market. And I think that's all for my point, and I go back to you.
Thank you very much. So perhaps we are now at the stage of concluding this session, but maybe since we have time, just me say a few words and some of the kind of takeaways for me. So one is on the data, and I think data is important. Not only for policy making, but also for informing the market in terms of, what are the skills which are available and what are the skills which are needed. And related to that, the importance of a labor market information system. I remember when I started off my career in development sector, that was one of the project I was working on. And I think somehow we have lost kind of pursuing that kind of approach. So that would be quite important, not only in the context of the kind of jobs and everything, but also in the context of the LDC graduation. The second is on the inclusion. And inclusion should not be taken from the aspect of kind of charity or, just social protection, but inclusion in terms of kind of, improving productivity and also kind of, converting some of the labor or some of the capacities which may not be fully utilized, and converting those capacities into to fully utilize those for economic growth and for development. And thirdly, and I think most importantly, is this collaboration, the tripartite kind of engagement, the employers, and the government. I think that's key, because if you would not have all those three institutions speaking to each other, you will not know what is happening in the market. You will not know what is needed to be done, and you would not be able to kind of to connect demand and supply. I do believe that this is a very right time for Cambodia to invest in data and invest in labor market information system, especially because of the LDC graduation as well. And as I said, one of the challenges which you will see is because of the tariffs and all those things, it would have impact on the cost. And it is not that you can reduce the minimum wages, because as productivity increases, that would be unfair. But that could only be addressed through the issues of improving productivity, right? So let's say a 1 unit of labor producing more outputs, that is where the focus should be. So with that, I would like to thank all the panelists. I think they really followed the timelines, and I believe this is one of the few sessions which is ending on time. So I wish you all the best and have a very nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, our presenter, and thanks to Mr. Sakel Ahmed.